for the All-Ireland Football Championship has happened. It is Kerry against Mayo, Galway against Armagh, Dublin against Cork, Derry against Clare. Tasty enough draw, to say the least. We'll obviously touch on that Kerry-Mayo clash in just a moment, but I think Armagh are the story of the morning after yesterday's win. They're on all the back pages. Clockwork Orange is what it says in the back of the Irish Daily Star. They will be absolutely thrilled to have avoided the Kerry-Dublin side of the draw, I'm sure, because that looked like we're seeing momentum building in a side that could go all the way to an All-Ireland final here.
Yeah, they were massively impressive. It's funny, when you play Donegal, I think, so first 15-20 minutes of the game, Donegal actually looked pretty good, well in control. Armagh were kind of stuttering along a little bit, bar of course for the brilliant goal in the first minute. But Donegal are a weird team in the sense of once they go behind, they have no plan B. The plan B is, okay, they stick Murphy in full forward, but at that stage, Armagh were ready for that. Once Armagh managed to get their nose in front at that vital period around the 25th, 26th minute, there was no looking back. Like, really, they won at a canter. They were very impressive from both an offensive attacking point of view and a defensive point of view. Fellas know their roles. Great communication on the pitch, not afraid to mix it up, long ball, short ball, probing, guys willing to take on shots. And then they've got some players who are just absolutely imperious at the moment. Like O'Neill is just saying, listen, give me the ball. It's funny watching him, and there was a little segue where he kind of brushes past Murphy after kicking one of his scores, and Murphy kind of looks at him as if to say, well, that's what I was able to do and I'm not able to do it anymore, because O'Neill was literally going, I'll catch it, I'll kick it, I'll do whatever you want, I'll tackle back. And he was just outstanding. And when you have a player in that kind of form, who's been in that form all year, like you remember what he was like against Dublin in the league, it's just, it breeds massive confidence around the squad, around the rest of the players. And they know that if when he's needed and when they need to get a score, he's a guy who'll put his hand up and get that score for you. And you can see it. Like, I've never seen Stephen Campbell play as well as he's been playing consistently. He's a guy who might have come on and lasted 25, 30, 40 minutes. He often got the shepherd's hook on numerous occasions, and you could see he'd be cutting a kind of a frustrated figure, whereas now he's playing with massive confidence. As I say, taking shots on that maybe, where you need that confidence, to take those shots on, and he's doing that. So McGeaney and the rest of the management team there have obviously instilled a great belief in them. And they're a very, very dangerous opposition now. Because Croke Park, I think, I know Donaghy mentioned it, but Croke Park will suit them. The vast expanses will suit their kicking game. I think they'll be able to actually pull Galway apart, and I'm not convinced of Galway. I wasn't convinced of Roscommon, and that showed up at the weekend. And I'm not really convinced of Connacht. I wasn't convinced of Mayo at the weekend either. So, I think Armagh will be licking their lips at this one.
Yeah, they must be waking up incredibly excited, because when you look at the four teams on that side of the draw, Armagh are actually the ones who've been in an All-Ireland final most recently. This is a huge opportunity. So, is there a balance now of actually for the management team in terms of hype and excitement of? You want to ride that wave of momentum that they have from the couple of weeks and the victories they've had over the last couple of weeks, and how you make sure that actually you don't start looking a little bit too far ahead, which I'm sure all four of those counties are thinking, like, one of us is going to end up in an All-Ireland final here.
Yeah, there's a balancing act, absolutely, Nathan, and I think they'll do a job of trying to bring them back down to earth. But at the same time, what you want to do is say, listen, this is what you can do. You don't want to take too much confidence from them, and you don't want to kind of burst the bubble too much. You want to instill the confidence into them. You want to say this is what you can do, but it's built on a certain number of building blocks. Like, it's funny, after the last game, I think again Donaghy was interviewed, as he seems to be the person who goes out there in front of the media. But anyway, he mentioned that Kieran McGeaney got back to basics. He got back to literally hard work. So I'd say the build up to that game was, it's 15 on 15, and we're going to outwork our opposite man. There was no kind of fancy stuff. There was no, like, of course they had patterns during the game, but I'd say he literally just wanted a performance as regards energy, intensity, work rate. and if they were getting kind of 8 or 9 out of 10 at that level, well then the rest would look after itself. And I'd say he's instilled that in them now, and I'd say that's kind of like, as I said, a basis for them going forward, because I think he knows once the talent, once the work rate and once the intensity is there, once the intent is there, that the talent will show through, which it has been doing.
It'll obviously be a fascinating tactical battle in that one, and also how Armagh just approach it from minute to minute. Like early in the game yesterday, and McGinley was saying in co-commentary, that's why you drop off a kick out, because Patton was just going long, finding his man. And you say there earlier on that Michael Murphy was looking at Rian O'Neill, like that's the sort of stuff I used to be able to do. It looked like it was old school Michael Murphy for the opening quarter of the game yesterday. So what did Armagh do that forced Patton to go short, and essentially the whole thing blew up in their face as a result of those kickouts changing, right?
Yeah, like, people will look, and we'll get onto the Kildare Mayo game in a while, I'm sure in a minute. There's an awful lot of pressure is heaped on the kick out at the moment, and an awful lot of pressure is obviously heaped on the goalkeeper, because he's controlling it per se. But the control of the kick out is only so good as, and the accuracy and I suppose the completion of the kick out is only so good as the outfield movement and the outfield players. When you look at Evan Comerford for Dublin, he very rarely has to hit a kick out into a bunch of players. He generally just pops a kick out to a man who invariably you're kind of going, how has that guy got so much space? There's not an occasion where the player is generally under pressure. But yesterday, in a number of games over the weekend, but especially on Patton's one, he kicked a short kick out to a guy who was coming directly at him, which is always a very, very tricky thing to do, because he has no angle. The defender, he's literally running back at you. So his thing is, he has to first of all gather the ball, which they didn't do. If you remember the second one, he spilled the ball and left the opportunity. But if you have your back to the play, i.e. you're facing the goalkeeper, you don't know necessarily what's coming left or right of you. As soon as you turn, you get hit, and you're up for grabs. So from an Armagh point of view, they executed it perfectly. They literally saw him, they knew the opportunity, they said, right, we squeeze in here, as soon as he turns we nab him, we tried to turn him over, and we put pressure on him. If he had gone back to Patton, they would have been right on Patton as well. The strange thing was, I suppose, that he did it a second time. After getting away with the first one, I would have just said, right, I'm putting this down, I'm just going 60-70 metres with this, because we got out of jail on that one, so let's just get it out of here. And that was the one that I think caused obviously the angst. Probably the players necessarily themselves weren't really expecting it, because I can't remember who fumbled it, but I think it was a full-back who came running in at him. But yeah, a little bit of a kind of it's small margins, but as I say, the problem wasn't even necessarily that. The problem was Donegal, they can't change their pattern. When they go behind, they're kind of consistently doing the slow build-up play. They're looking for the runners. And you were kind of just saying, listen, they're beating Dockett. After 25, like literally after that goal, and not very long after, you were just saying, there's no way they're getting back into this game, because they don't have that forward prowess anymore. McBurty is struggling.
Can they refine that, though, is the thing? Because it seems that there's like a really good young generation of footballer there, but if they want to get over the line one more time, they kind of need to do it with McBurty and Murphy still playing. And it feels like it feels like the time might be up at this point, but there could be one last squeeze next season.
But I think they need to alter their style of play.
Yeah,
like the game has moved on now, I think, and risk takers more often than not, by taking a risk in the game, you get fruition. You get the result. The very first goal for Armagh was a risk. Most fellas would have just taken that ball on a short little pass, or as we've seen in the past, hold on to possession, go backwards with a kick. Whereas the intent was there straight away. That wasn't him he just looked up, he knew, he said, right, if we get this ball, probably even from the throw up without a free, we're going in there first time. And you can see that now in lots of teams. If you watch that intent, even from throw ups, the way fellas win it, they don't go back anymore, they try to go forward. So you can see teams that are taking risks, calculated risks of a session. They're not just pinging balls from all over the place, but they're doing it at times. And it happened in the Kildare Mayo game a few times. Remember one where Flynn caught the ball in. It was a lovely floated pass into him. I think the game I don't see that from Donegal at all. And it's not like they don't have the players, but I just think they're hamstrung massively by the pattern that they play in, and it needs to change for them to be successful again.
It certainly seems that way. You mentioned Kildare, you mentioned Mayo there. It's Mayo
What is Mayo's pattern of play?
Well, like, I mean, it's you know what, they're an amazing team. I know people are heaping praise on Keegan, and rightly so, but you know, Mullen was absolutely, I thought, was just as imperious. Like, they're the funniest team to watch attack, because their full back line attack more than their half forward line attack. You know, the 2-3-4 generally bypass the midfield and bypass the half forward line. And if you look at any of them, even the goal, you know, I think O'Hara had come on, and O'Hara slips the pass into Mullen, right? So, and not far from around there, Hessian is around it. Like, they're all in around that space. And actually they had to do it because the forwards for Mayo were struggling, to be honest. It was a very strange game. I think Kildare will absolutely kick themselves. I think Kildare got an awful lot of stuff right. You know, the intensity that they were both tackling, the intensity of their tracking players. We spoke about this after the Dublin game, and the fact that they were just at 6s and 7s. Fellas weren't doing their jobs, fellas weren't following players, and effectively they gifted those 5 goals to Dublin. Whereas I thought on the weekend they were much better, much more on it. And where people were heaping praise on their forward prowess, I think the forwards let them down. You know, the forwards at vital times, people would say about shot selection, but the thing about shot selection is, if you're 2 points up or 3 points up and it's around 50 minutes gone, and Mayo are coming at you, and you manage to break out of that, if the shot isn't on and it's a 50-50 shot, you can't take it, because by taking it you give the kick out straight away to Mayo, and they just come back at you. By slowing it down, by recycling, by maybe just probing again for literally another minute and a half or 2 minutes, it gives everyone a bit of a breather in your team, and it allows you potentially go at them, and it gets them set, and it gets you set. By Flynn, Jimmy Hyland, Cribben, these lads taking long range shots and them going wide,
constantly to the left of the post.
Yeah,
like
it was
that
just,
shot happened repetitively.
Is that just, I don't want to say, because you're talking about very established and experienced players there, but actual experience of top level football. They've had one season in Division 1, that they're not used to having to make those sort of decisions, because, you know, Division 2 are, you know, the majority of Leinster games, you get away with that sort of stuff.
Correct. And I think, look, what happens is you do a few and they come off, right? So they're coming off in the first, so you think, I can continue to do this, you know, but they will, I think Kildare will absolutely feel, although the measure of the thing, someone will look at the result and say, no, Kildare were massively in that game, right? And I think Mayo will count themselves very lucky. Horan, I think, managed the bench much better than Glenn Ryan did, and I think that as well comes to experience. You know, he knew when to bring on pace around the middle. I thought O'Callaghan was gone in the middle of the field. The fellow ran himself into it. He did an unbelievable amount of work, and he was a busted flush at about 55-60 minutes. They needed some energy in there, and I just think the shot selection, the lack of energy down the stretch, that ability to close out the game and strangle it and just give your players a bit of a break, and then we face a kick out. And I think that heaped an awful lot of pressure on their goalkeeper, and again they didn't have the same energy to get into spaces. So the goalkeeper, because actually, to be fair to Sky, you could see an awful lot of the kick outs from behind, and I was looking going, there's nowhere obvious for him to kick this. You know, he just has to put it into an area, and invariably Mayo were winning those. But like, look, on the flip side, Mayo, you know, again, the attitude of them to continue to go, their self-belief, and their substitutes made a big difference. You know, Boland came on, kicked a couple of rakers. Nearly every one of them had a contribution to make, which is what you want. And I don't just mean like a small, like a pretty big contribution to make. And you know, down the stretch from 60 minutes on, I think they outscored Kildare 1-3 to a point, which is pretty savage.
Back to Nathan's earlier question about what is Mayo's style of play, what is their plan?
Yeah, I kind of avoided that, really.
What I'm interested in is, like, do we expect them to have something up their sleeve for this All-Ireland quarter-final? Because if they approach that quarter-final the exact same way as the league final, we know what the outcome will be. It kind of feels that if they approach this game the same way as the Kildare game as well, we know what the outcome will be. It feels that something has to be planned, some sort of defensive system has to be implemented that we haven't seen so far this year from Mayo for them to get to an All-Ireland semi-final.
I think they're smart enough and they're on the road long enough and they have enough belief in themselves that they can alter it, right? And I think they have the personnel to do that. So I would not be at all surprised that O'Shea kind of starts at 11 and goes into that double 6 role, right, that he did during the league. So he goes in there as
but not for the final, obviously. They didn't really implement a double 6 at all.
But I think they, you know, Flynn, I'm not sure, but I think, like, I mean, I was surprised. He must have been injured, okay, because he had a powerful league, and I think he did get injured at one stage. So it's good to see him back. To be so happy that he got 10 or 15 minutes into his legs. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in, because they'll need that mobile midfield against Kerry. They will, absolutely. But I think they will protect, and I think what they'll decide is, looking at Cork against Kerry, they'll say, right, we need to just put an X as much as we can on Clifford, and then we fix it up. So they didn't go, which was surprisingly so. They didn't go, as you say, with that 6-6 against Kerry in the league. So was he kind of looking and saying, you never know, we will meet these again later down the year. We don't want to show them all our cards, because it was a kind of a thing, if you remember then, where it was Mullen against Clifford, and he handled them well enough, but eventually, Clifford got away from him, and there's the ones where Mullen was kind of jawing at him and stuff like that. But,
yeah, O'Hora.
Oh, sorry, O'Hora. Yeah.
But Mullen was on him for a section of the earlier game in Tralee.
Yes.
And you could say that I know it's smaller pitch, worse conditions and all that, but it worked out better for Mayo that day.
I can see them. Look, as I said, they've got the personnel. They certainly have the personnel. And what they do, and what Kerry don't particularly like to do, is they attack from that full back line. So Clifford will find himself a lot of the time running back down the pitch. So he will, and it will happen. And if they feel that they need to go, Keegan, Mullen, or whoever it is, Hessian, whoever it is back in there, Durkin, McLaughlin, they will go. So they will test you both on to use the rugby parlance, both sides of the ball. They will test you, from there, from defending, and they'll test you, see how much, fortitude you have to go back the other way. Now, Kerry have changed that in the last year or so. You can definitely see that they're willing to roll up the socks and get back and work. But to constantly do it and to constantly switch it around, that's where I think Mayo will look to do. And I think they will position someone like an O'Shea in that central area just to stop those easy balls in front of the D. I'd say he'd be just said, listen, that's where you sit. I don't really care. Get it, and when we get it, then you come out, you burst out, you take a few hits. O'Shea's a funny individual in the sense of he's like one of those kind of machines you see where the flies get attracted to it and die. Fellas come at him to hit him, and invariably they end up in the ground, but he gets the little hand passes away, and people don't think he's doing much, but actually, by the fact that he's moving and he attracts players, he sucks guys in and then he just slips hand passes. His hands are very, very good, and he's very, very good at that. So that's where I think they will try to find some joy against Kerry.
It's obviously an incredibly exciting draw for Mayo to get to share the pitch with this all-conquering Kerry side, and we will have a guard of honour for David Clifford at Croke Park on what looks like Sunday week.
At the very least.
At the very least, but all the focus ahead of the game is going to be on who marks Clifford. You're talking there about maybe stopping the supply more to Clifford, but they are going to have to man-mark him, and he took O'Hora apart. So it's too deep for Lee Keegan to go back. Presumably Keegan goes on Sean O'Shea. Do you put Mullen on him again?
I think it's a bit of a I think there's a committee maybe. I think O'Hora, Mullen are your obvious choices, but I think there's definitely, like where you say he took him apart, I think he took him apart in different circumstances where there was an awful lot of room in front of him and he could go left, right. The supply of the pressure on the ball coming in, as a defender, that makes a massive difference. It gives you the opportunity to get a hand in or to push a guy where you need to push him. If the player out the field is able to get his head up and spray balls left and right to someone like Clifford, you're in big trouble. And it doesn't really make a difference how many players you have back there. So I think the supply, pressure on the supply, plus someone like an O'Shea, as I say, in that area. It's not even that. Okay, so people say, well, O'Shea isn't the quickest guy, but it's not even about that. It's about him covering an area. So you then as a defender know if it comes there, he'll be there. So I now can concentrate on this side of Clifford. So I can go right, he can go left. If it comes long and high across, well, then we can both shift across. But that's more about it. It's more about angles with him rather than actually covering him off. I wouldn't put O'Shea, I wouldn't double up on him. Because what that does is it just, now there's two players gone, and what Clifford would be smart enough to do is there's so much potency elsewhere that he'll just take those two players out of the game and Kerry will have a straight line through on goal. So leave O'Shea there, or whoever it is, more than likely it could be him, in that central area, and then go man to man on Clifford.
We do have a couple of weeks to build up to that, and I'm sure there will be plenty of preview next week before those quarterfinals. Clare are going to be in the quarterfinals as well, Anthony, and I think everybody wanted them to not get Kerry or Dublin in the quarterfinals to give them a chance of actually, or just stop playing Kerry for once in a big game, in a game that will define their season. Do they have a chance against Derry in this quarterfinal on the evidence of Saturday?
It's hard. It's hard. It was a fantastic game. I think over the weekend, the Mayo Kildare game was kind of riddled with an awful lot of mistakes and stuff, but it was still quite exciting. But there was some great games. There was some great games, and I think it puts a lot of kind of faith back in Gaelic football, and it shows the idea of this risk taking, as I say. Clare had an unbelievable amount of energy. Like, I've never seen the amount of energy that they had in that first 45, 50 minutes. But I think Roscommon, kind of a la Kildare, will be absolutely kicking themselves. Like, I'd say they'll be kind of sitting back there today kind of going, how did we lose that game from the position we were in? How did we actually, hand that over? So I think there was two things that happened. I think Roscommon came good at a vital time in the match to go 3 up, and then I think they thought, job done, we'll just see this out. And instead of pushing up on Clare, really squeezing them, because I think Clare were at sea, lost at that stage. Podge Collins hit a speculative wide. They looked a beaten docket. The energy levels were low, and I thought Roscommon could have really, put the hammer on them, and they didn't. And that allowed the door just to be slightly open. And to be fair, they have, Sexton in the full forward line was absolutely brilliant, and a lot of different players around who stood up, and they got to look at the rub of the green at certain times, and they made it what it was. But their energy levels are fantastic. The way they come and run at pace at you, they picked off some great. So, like, some of the kicking in that first half was just absolutely brilliant. Some of the point taking on both sides was fantastic. So I think they'll go in with confidence. I think it is a bit of a stretch too far, because they won't really, although they have played obviously Derry in Division 2 in the league, this is a different animal. And it's going to be interesting to see, can Derry replicate their style of play in Croke Park? Can they, tighten things up as much as they can up north, in the sense of make it very, very difficult for you, and then look to break, because
they're being favourites as well. They've been underdogs in pretty much all their games so far.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, and I think they'll be surprised with not surprised, but I think they'll be. They would be. It'd be remiss of them not to kind of tip the hat to Clare's energy, as I say, Clare's pace, Clare's ability to run at you, Clare's ability to kick scores from all angles. They run at very, very good angles. They're very, very confident in their kicking. But it is. I think it's going to be a step too far, to be honest with you, for Clare. I just think Derry will have probably enough in them. I think Derry now have had a bit of a break. They've probably reset the clock. They've given guys that needed a break, and I think they'll come back and they'll probably say to themselves, we'll keep it tight, and then when we break, we can do massive damage down the far end field. So I think it's going to be a brilliant game again, and I think both sides will come out to play in that game.
For sure. Just one last thing we wanted to get your take on before we wrapped up is the situation in Meath. We had Andy McEntee in studio with us on Friday for his exit interview after leaving his post as Meath boss. One person who's not going to be succeeding him in the job is Colin O'Rourke. He was asked about it on the Sunday game yesterday, and he says, no, not for me. Who is the guy that you want to see?
Oh, that's the $1 million question.
You see him when you look in the mirror in the morning.
Yeah, that's the question.
Oh, Jesus. No, I think it's. I think for the Meath job, for any inter-county job, I think there has to be a willingness to put your life on hold for that period of time. And Andy alluded to that obviously during the interview, and everyone knows that. But I don't think people really understand, what exactly that means. It is a 24/7 type of situation. And I think you nearly have to be passionate about it, but you also have to be able to leave it kind of at the door when you come in, if you know what I mean. There has to be a break from it. And I think you can get consumed by it. Meath supporters are, they're very simple, I think, to on the majority to kind of appease, because you just need effort and you need commitment. So you can go into a game, and if a Meath fan will see a player literally busting a gut and diving on the ball and doing what they can to win the game, even if they win it or not, they will be happy. And that's something that has always been there. So You know, I know I alluded to this a couple of weeks ago. The players themselves and the players in the county who are available, they need to get back to brass tack. They need to get back to that ability of character and what it takes to actually put on the jersey. And I don't just mean that in kind of, that's a simple thing to throw out, but what it means to actually get to those levels. You can be conditioned, you can be trained with the best trainers, you can have the best skill sets, all those different things, but that thing needs to be found, whatever that is. And when we look at these 8 teams that are left, all of those teams have that, some more so than others. But you talk about Clare. Clare players had that at the weekend. Like, I mean, they went to some areas that they didn't want to go. They could have easily petered out in that game, but they found the character to keep going. So, you know, I think Andy's situation is strange. I think the county board thing is a very, very odd situation because the move against them last year at the start of the year was odd. You know, I think there was a lot of pressure that came from the whole Bernard Flynn thing that happened in the under-20s, which I think was ridiculous, really, to be honest with you, because if you remember at the time, Flynn resigned as manager of it, and there was this kind of accusation that because certain players weren't made available for the under-20s, or were rather, should I say, were superseded by the seniors, which is the way it should be. You know, even if you're an under-20, if you're on the senior panel should get first dibs. So I think that caused more pressure to be heaped on Andy and his management team. And unfortunately, players are just, you know, they're human. And what happens is if they get a sense or a smell that, well, actually this guy and these fellas might not be here and it mightn't be the same gig next year, whether they're making a decision themselves, it just slips back. They maybe go from 5th gear to 4th gear, or at those vital times, as I say, it's just not there. I don't know why. Maybe it's human nature. You know, I played under managers, you know, fortunately or unfortunately during my career where, you know, kind of as a bunch of players you said, well, actually it's our head on the chopping block too. Like, we are the players, we're the people who are out there on the pitch, and you have to have the character and the will to say, no matter what's going on the sideline and behind the scenes, we're going to actually do it on the pitch. We're going to try to raise the standards. So I think regardless of who gets the job, I think there's a body of work to be done there. I think the county board have to back a person. There can't be any shred of doubt that this person hasn't got their backing for 2 or 3 years or whatever it is, or even a year, and that there has to be a willingness to get the whole county behind them. Much the same as the whole county is behind the Meath ladies. You know, you can see the ferocity of the support for the Meath ladies, which is fantastic. And everything feeds off itself. You know, what's on the pitch feeds off what's off the pitch, and it all becomes very, very harmonious. But if you don't have that, if there's a split at all in that, you can deny it for a period of time, which probably Andy and his management team did, but eventually it just seeps back through the cracks, and unfortunately that's what happened.
It has to have an impact. Like, does that put off people from wanting the job? Like,
well, I think so. Like, I akin it to, you know, you go in to be, say, the CEO of a company, and your board of directors above are split on whether they want you or not. Would anyone take that job? No, I wouldn't. So you go in, and the only reason you would go in to become the main man and the CEO of that company will be that the board of directors are fully behind you, and they're all saying, we're all pointing towards the North Star, we're all going to get this done, whatever that is. And like, this fanciful idea is, that's an All-Ireland. Well, no, it's not. What is it at the start? What is success? Like, I mean, is it a small thing that we're going to just say, right, we're going to perform, and our performances are going to be at a level in it? We may not win those games, but it's going to be at a level. And if we keep getting those performances, which I would imagine some team like Derry did, you know, they played it. If we keep getting those performances and we build and we build and we build, well, then eventually we may get to Croke Park in an All-Ireland quarter-final. And here they are.
So is it that man in the mirror when you wake up in the morning? At any stage, maybe not next year, at some point down the line?
You lads keep me too busy for that stuff.
Come on, get off the fence.
So you're saying there's no chance?
No.
Anthony, great stuff. Thanks, Willie, for popping in this morning.
Cheers, lads.
Appreciate it. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day.